Hello and welcome, dear friends. Picture yourself standing in the bustling heart of London around the dawn of the 19th century. The city is alive, but not in the way we might imagine today. No peaceful strolls through tree-lined parks or leisurely bike rides down wide avenues. No, London at this time is swelling with life in a different way, much like an overcooked pudding stuffed with people factories and more soot than the inside of your grandmother's chimney. A city where the air feels heavy thick and cloying smog so dense that it seems to coat your very soul. Imagine it. The year is 1800, and the capital has already ballooned to nearly 1 million souls. And as the century moves on, by mid-century, it will triple in size. The largest city in the world, the beating black heart of the Industrial Revolution. But beating? Oh, how true that word is, because if the smog didn't choke you, the constant thumping of the machines, the endless clatter of gears and pistons in every street corner and factory surely would. It's hard to imagine now, but this was a time when the streets rang not just with footsteps, but with the relentless noise of industry. And yet it's this very noise, this constant hum of machines and smokestacks that makes London what it is. Everywhere you look, chimneys rise like giant stone cigarettes, puffing out thick gray clouds of coal smoke, filling the air with a smell that's hard to forget the burnt toast of the city, mixed with a trace of rotten eggs and damp laundry. Now, if you're wondering whether that's something you'd want to breathe, well, you're not alone. People of that time didn't need to bother seasoning their food because they were already Imagine walking down the street with every breath a struggle against the weight of the air where your morning coffee is seasoned, not with sugar or cream, but with ash flakes drifting onto it like a tragic form of latte art. Now settle in for a moment. Close your eyes if you'd like. Imagine, just for a while, what it would be like to live in this gritty, noisy, ever-humming metropolis and feel the thick smog of industrial London wrap around you. This wasn't just a seasonal inconvenience. No, this was a permanent roommate, one that never paid rent, hogged the blankets, and on the coldest days tried to kill you in your sleep. Yes, those fogs. They weren't really fogs at all. They were smog so thick at times that people couldn't see a few feet in front of them, walking into horses without realizing it, only to stare into the eyes of a beast before realizing they'd crossed paths. The roads weren't just filled with carts and horses. They were filled with a murky fog so thick that if you weren't careful, you might not see an obstacle before it was too late. The very essence of London seemed to vanish behind the haze, with life continuing, but with a kind of eerie blindness. But in this world, even the fog had a strange beauty to it. When you couldn't see your hand in front of your face, you learned to listen to the hum of life in new ways. You see, the smog, though deadly, became a part of everyday life. People joked about it, of course. They had to. After all, how else could you live through something so unbearable? But even as they chuckled about it, they knew that there was no escaping it. Imagine yourself standing on the corner of a busy street. If you could even see the street, your clothes covered in soot from the air, your eyes squinting through the fog, trying to make out the silhouette of a friend or the approaching cart. Now, this might sound uncomfortable, perhaps even a bit tragic, and it certainly was. Yet in the heart of this story is a certain kind of resilience. People learned to adapt. They joked about the conditions, wrote songs about it, and carried on with daily life, knowing they had no choice but to keep going. And as the fog rolled in every day, so did the noise, the industry, the hustle, and the unrelenting rhythm of life in the world's largest city. But now let's pause for a moment and reflect on how much we take for granted today: clean air, safe streets, clear views, and the simple act of breathing without difficulty. And as you listen, think of these workers, the silent heroes of a time when every breath could be your last. How different life must have been, how the thick veil of smoke and soot became part of the very soul of this city. Welcome, dear friend, to Smogtown, a place where the streets were thick with fog, the air was heavy with coal, and yet the heart of the city beat on strong despite it all. So before we begin, take a moment to relax. Let your mind float away with the stories of the hard-working souls who lived in this strange world of soot and steam. Leave a comment, tell me when and where you're listening, and hit subscribe if you enjoy these tales of history where laughter mixes with the sorrow of the past. We'll dive deeper into the smog, the factories, the grim lives, and the unexpected humor of this era as we explore the harsh yet somehow lively history of working-class life in industrial London. As you drift further into the story of industrial London, let's take a deeper breath though. I must warn you, this is not the fresh, clean air of a country breeze. No, dear friend, this is London in the 19th century, where the very air is thick, heavy, and laced with the remnants of industry. It's not a gentle fog, nor the mist you might expect to find over a tranquil lake. This smog is something altogether different. It's a force of nature, but one that mankind has molded, shaped, and quite tragically learned to live with. Imagine waking up in your cramped tenement as the faintest glow of light slips through the gaps in the window shutters. The city is already stirring its heartbeat, a constant hum of machines, cartwheels, and the familiar clatter of voices pulsing through the streets. But the first thing you notice, even before the rising noise of life, is the smell. It hangs in the air like a heavy cloak, thick and almost tangible, as if the city itself has wrapped itself in a blanket of soot and ash. You know it's not just any old fog that has rolled in. This fog is the very breath of industry, a toxic cocktail of coal smoke, sulfur, and mystery ingredients that you'd rather not think too deeply about. The city's air has become a constant companion to all who live in it, a presence as enduring as the very buildings that crowd together along the narrow streets. It doesn't take long for you to realize that breathing in London in this industrial era is no longer a simple natural act. It's a battle. Every time you inhale, it feels as if the air itself has grown heavy with the burdens of progress, carrying with it more than just the faint scent of soot. No, this air tastes of sulfur, of coal, of something so pungent and acrid that you wonder how your lungs haven't revolted by now. Yet life goes on. The sound of the factory whistles breaks through the haze, calling workers to the machines that churn and grind away in the heart of the city. The streets, though, nearly obscured by the fog, are teeming with people, workers heading to the factories, children running errands, the elderly shuffling to the local pub or market. And as you step into this fog, you can't help but notice how it clings to everything. Your hair, your clothes, your skin. Nothing is spared from the touch of the smog. It coats everything, a fine layer of grime that feels more like a permanent companion than a temporary inconvenience. It's as if London itself has been bathed in a thick soup of smoke, and no one is immune from its reach. Now let me guide you further into the city, past the cobblestone streets and the chimneys that rise like giant stone fingers poking the sky. These chimneys are the lungs of industrial London, tirelessly puffing out smoke with no regard for the consequences. And it's not just the industrial machines that demand this sacrifice. No, even the homes, the very places where people rest their weary bodies after long hours of labor, burn coal to keep the cold at bay. The more coal you burn, the thicker the fog becomes. It's a vicious cycle, but one that the city can't seem to escape. If you're wondering just how thick this smog is, let me paint the picture for you. Picture yourself walking down the street, your breath visible in the air, as you trudge along the ground beneath your feet, a dull grayish brown. Visibility is a constant challenge. You can't see more than a few feet ahead of you. In fact, some have said that when the smog is at its worst, the city seems to dissolve into nothing but a blur. It's almost as if you're walking through a dream, or perhaps a nightmare, a place where everything familiar becomes indistinguishable from the gray fog. The only way to navigate this strange landscape is by sound and instinct. You listen for the distant clang of a bell or the rattle of a cart, and you feel your way through the murky air, trusting that the steps you take will lead you to where you need to go. And if you're lucky, maybe you'll catch a glimpse of the sun. Perhaps on rare occasions, the sun will break through the clouds of smoke, casting a pale light over the city. But even then, the sun's rays feel weak, as if even it is struggling against the suffocating blanket of smog. The fog doesn't just obscure your vision, it dulls your senses, making everything feel just a little more distant, a little more muted. And when the fog lifts, as it sometimes does, there's always the lingering reminder of its presence, the smell of smoke still clinging to your clothes, the ash that floats in the air like some kind of spectral residue. Now take a moment to imagine what it would be like to live in such a city, day after day, your lungs slowly becoming accustomed to the ash that fills them. It's a grim reality, but one that Londoners have learned to adapt to. After all, what else can you do when the air itself seems to conspire against you? You breathe it in, you live with it, and you carry on. But even in this harsh environment, there's a certain kind of dark humor that emerges. People joke about the smog as if it's just another part of life, a fact of existence, much like the clanging of factory machines or the sight of the soot-covered streets. It's said that in industrial London, if you weren't coughing, you weren't living. The sound of coughing becomes a kind of soundtrack to the city, a rhythmic, almost hypnotic noise that blends with the roar of the factories, the clattering of horse-drawn carts, and the shuffling of workers' footsteps. In a sense, the city's very essence is marked by this cough, this persistent reminder that the air is never truly clean. It's a badge of survival, one that signifies endurance in the face of relentless hardship. But even this constant coughing, this desperate battle for breath, becomes just another part of the rhythm of life. People learn to laugh through their wheezes, to carry on through their struggles, because that's what they must do. The smell of London in the industrial era, like the air itself, is thick with the residue of progress. It's a mixture of burnt toast, sulfur, rotting eggs, and damp wool. It's a scent that becomes as familiar as the sound of the factory whistle. And while it's unpleasant, it's also inescapable. It's progress, they say, though it's hard to imagine how. Progress smells like sulfur. It smells like smoke. It smells like the price of success that no one asked to pay. But the workers, the people who live and breathe through it all, they don't have much of a choice. They are the ones who keep the wheels turning, who feed the machines with their labor, their sweat, and yes, even their lungs. So, the next time you find yourself looking at the sky, at the crisp, clean air around you, remember London, the London that was not the one that exists today. Picture the soot, the smoke, and the smog that once filled the city's air. Feel the weight of it on your chest, and know that for those who lived through it, each breath was a fight for survival. But in the face of this suffocating reality, life in London went on. People adapted as they always do. They found humor in the dark. They found strength in the struggle. and they found resilience in the suffocating fog of progress. And so, we move forward together as we continue to explore the world of industrial London. A world where the air was thick with smoke, the streets were filled with soot, and yet somehow life found a way to thrive. As we continue our journey through the haze of industrial London, let's take a step back and consider the fuel that powered it all, the substance that breathed life into this great machine, quite literally. You've already tasted the air thick with coal dust, and now it's time to understand the true addiction that defined this city. Coal. It was more than just an energy source. It was the lifeblood of London, the very force that made the Industrial Revolution tick, the unseen but ever-present presence in every home, factory, and locomotive. And like any addiction, coal had its hold on the city, a grip so tight that even as the city choked on its fumes, it couldn't break free. Imagine yourself walking through the streets of London once again, but this time, picture the workers moving through a city built on coal. The fog, thick as it is, isn't just the product of nature, it's the consequence of burning coal day in and day out. Everywhere you look, the air is filled with tiny black specks of soot. It settles on your skin, on your hair, on your clothes, and most disturbingly, in your lungs. It's almost as if the very essence of London, its personality, is made up of coal and smoke. You can't escape it no matter how hard you try. You can wash your face, scrub your clothes, and yet there's no erasing the fact that coal is as much a part of this city as the cobbled streets or the steam engines puffing along the tracks. Now let's think about why coal had such a hold over London, and why it wasn't just the factories and the trains that craved it, but the very homes of its people. The city's addiction to coal was a reflection of its desire to grow, to expand, to become the beating heart of industry. Factories, workshops, and steam engines all needed coal. It was the fuel that kept the gears turning, that powered the new world that was rising in front of them. But it wasn't just the machines that were fed by this black gold, it was the homes of the people too. In the bitter winters, when the chill would bite through to the bone, coal was the only thing keeping the cold at bay. Homes cramped and packed with families would burn coal in their fireplaces and stoves to warm the air, to make the freezing nights bearable. Even in the poorest neighborhoods, a small coal fire was the difference between survival and the kind of cold that would seep into your very bones. But here's the thing, the more coal they burned, the more the city suffocated. It wasn't just the industrial plants that consumed coal. No, this addiction reached into every corner of London. It wasn't uncommon to see a family huddled around a coal fire in their small, cramped home, their faces illuminated by the flickering orange light as they tried to stay warm, even as the air around them grew colder and colder. Coal, once used for warmth and industry, slowly became the very thing that held the city hostage, making life both possible and unbearable at the same time. And as the years rolled on, no one questioned it. The people of London were so used to coal, so dependent on it, that they hardly noticed how it had transformed their city, their air, and even their lives. The factories, too, were a reflection of this addiction. Imagine walking into one of these places, the factory floor humming with energy, the clanking of machines filling your ears as they churned away, transforming raw materials into the products that would fuel the empire. But all of this would come to a screeching halt if it weren't for coal. The machines, these iron beasts that seemed to run on nothing but steam and willpower, were fed by coal, and without it, the city would collapse. It was a city so dependent on coal that it became part of the industrial organism, each piece working together to keep the beast alive. The factories didn't just use coal, they consumed it with a hunger that could never be satisfied. Every day they burned more and more, and each day the air grew a little bit thicker, the smog a little heavier. And then there were the trains, the iron horses, that sliced through the country, connecting London to the farthest corners of the empire. But those trains, those engines of progress, were powered by coal, too. The trains didn't just need a little bit of coal to run. No, they needed vast amounts enough to fuel their insatiable hunger for speed and power. Picture the steam rising from the engine, the thick clouds of smoke pouring into the sky as the train huffs and puffs its way through the city. It's not just a train, it's a symbol of London's rise to greatness, fueled by the very substance that also choked it. Coal was everywhere, and even as the city grew, so did its reliance on this black, sticky fuel. Now let's pause for a moment and think about what it must have been like for the people of London living in a city so addicted to coal. Their homes, their work, their very lives were defined by it. They couldn't escape the coal, the smell, the soot, the smog, because it was a part of them as much as their heartbeat or their breath. The air they breathed was thick with the remnants of this burning addiction, and while they had no choice but to inhale it, they didn't necessarily have to like it. The more the city grew, the more coal it consumed, and the more the people of London found themselves trapped in a cycle they couldn't break. But even as the smog clouded the skies, there was something almost comforting about it. After all, coal powered the factories that provided jobs, it powered the trains that brought in goods, and it powered the homes that kept the people warm. In many ways, coal was the very thing that allowed the city to thrive. It was a paradox, a necessary evil that could not be avoided, no matter how thick the smoke became. Now let's think about how the people of London might have lived in this haze. Imagine stepping outside, walking down the streets of this great city, where the very air is a reminder of just how much coal is burned to keep the wheels of progress turning. The streets are covered in soot. The buildings are darkened with the same grime that clings to your clothes, your skin, your hair. It's as though the city itself has been marked by the very thing that made it great. And as you walk, you can feel the weight of the air thick with smoke hanging over you like a cloud that never moves. It's almost as if the air itself is a constant reminder of the price of progress, of the cost that comes with living in a city that never stops moving. And yet, despite the pollution, despite the constant haze that cloaks the city, Londoners continue to live, to work, to survive. They don't complain. They don't question it. They adapt. It becomes part of their daily rhythm, like the ticking of a clock or the ringing of the factory bells. Coal is their companion, their lifeblood, and they can't imagine a world without it, even as it fills their lungs with every breath. The addiction to coal becomes so ingrained in the fabric of the city that it's no longer even seen as an issue. It simply is. The smoke rises, the machines churn, and London moves forward, its pulse powered by the very substance that threatens to choke it. This, my dear friend, is the paradox of industrial London. It was a city of progress, of machines of innovation, but it was also a city built on an addiction that no one could escape. Coal fueled the very machines that made the city hum, but it also filled the air with a thick, suffocating fog that no one could escape. It was a city of contradictions, where progress and pollution, innovation and destruction existed side by side, each feeding the other in a cycle that could not be broken. And through it all, the people of London kept going, breathing in the very substance that made them who they were, because without it, there would be no London, no progress, no industrial revolution. Coal, in all its black, smoky glory, was as much a part of the city as the people who lived in it. And so, with each puff of smoke, the city continued to thrive, to grow to become something greater than it had ever been before, even as it choked on its own success. As we settle deeper into this story, let's take a moment to reflect on what happens when you live in a place like industrial London, where the very air you breathe is thick with smoke soot and the remnants of progress. The city's addiction to coal is not without its consequences, as much as the people would rather pretend otherwise. And though the fog, the soot, and the perpetual grind of industry have become second nature, it would be hard to ignore the toll they take on the body, mind, and spirit. So let me invite you now to take another gentle step, to breathe in a little deeper, though not too deeply, for the air is heavy and it weighs on you. The very essence of life in this sprawling, smoke-choked metropolis feels like a delicate balance, each breath a dance between survival and slow suffocation. Picture the daily existence of the Londoner as they navigate through the fog, their clothes dusted with black soot, their lungs burdened by every inhaled particle. It is a world where every step, every breath is marked by the unrelenting presence of coal and its after effects. The streets are not just paved with stone, they are paved with the very remnants of burning fuel, the residue of progress that is never quite washed away. And as you walk through it, you realize how much of London has been touched, no altered, by the consequences of its own rise to greatness. In the homes of the working class, things are no better. The constant burning of coal, while necessary for warmth and cooking, permeates every room. A small coal fire in the hearth might seem like a lifeline on a cold night, but it brings more than just warmth. The air inside the small, cramped homes is filled with the same toxic particles that have long since become a permanent fixture of the city. Picture yourself inside one of these homes, nestled in a narrow, soot-covered street. The fire crackles in the hearth, its warmth offering a momentary respite from the biting cold of London's winters. But as you sit there, you feel the air growing heavy, almost suffocating, with the remnants of the coal smoke that fills the room. It's in your lungs, it's on your skin, and it's in your hair. No matter how often you try to wipe it away, it clings to you, settling like a reminder that the very comfort you seek comes with a price. And while the fire provides warmth, it also brings with it an ever-present, unsettling smell. The scent of burning coal, of sulfur, and of something sharper, more acrid, wafts through the room, blending with the dampness of the city. Imagine sitting there with your family, perhaps in front of a small fire, trying to share a meal, but the thick, choking air makes everything seem slightly off, as though your senses are dulled. You eat your food, but the taste is never quite right. The very air around you seems to rob the flavors of their vibrancy, making every meal feel like a muted echo of what it should be. It's not just the immediate discomfort, though. The long-term consequences of living in such an environment are far more insidious. The working-class people of London, those who toil away in the factories, breathe in the dust and smoke day in and day out. And while they may not think too much about it in the rush of daily life, their bodies slowly begin to betray them. The smog, thick as it is, coats the insides of their lungs, making each breath harder than the last. Doctors, even in the early years of the century, begin to notice the effects of this daily inhalation of soot and coal dust. There's a new kind of illness making the rounds in London, the winter cough, the disease that seems to settle deep in the chest and refuse to leave. It becomes a constant companion for many, especially those who live closest to the factories, to the very epicenter of industrial life. But let's not pretend this is something that only affects the poor. Oh no, the smog, though. It suffocates the working class more than anyone else, doesn't discriminate. It seeps into the grand homes of the wealthy, too creeping in through cracks in the windows and slipping under the doorways. Even the most aristocratic mansions cannot escape the suffocating embrace of London's coal addiction. Sure, their lives might be cushioned by comforts by servants and grand rooms filled with velvet and silk, but even they are not untouched by the consequences of industrial progress. Imagine sitting in a drawing room in Mayfair, the grandest district of London, the walls lined with tapestries and paintings, the air thick with the scent of burning coal. The wealthy might have servants to maintain their homes, but they cannot escape the fog. They cough, they wheeze. They feel the weight of the air in their own lungs, though perhaps they will never understand it as deeply as those who work the factory floors. And so the air, which should be a simple life-giving force, becomes something more, something complex, something layered with the very cost of the city's rise to power. The pollution becomes a reminder not just of the city's ambition, but of its failure to reckon with the toll that progress exacts on the lives of its people. The more the city grows, the thicker the fog becomes, and the more entrenched the addiction to coal becomes. It's a city that can't turn back a city that must keep moving forward, even as it chokes on its own success. But amidst all of this, Londoners adapt. They find ways to live within the fog, to make peace with the soot that coats their lives. Children play in the streets, their laughter filling the air, though it's interrupted by coughing fits. Men trudge to work, their clothes stiff with soot, their lungs burning with every breath, but they push forward, knowing there's little choice but to keep going. They've learned to joke about it, to laugh through the pain, because in a world so heavy with smoke, humor is often the only thing that can lift the spirits. And yet, despite the resilience, despite the humor, there's no denying that this is a city of contradictions. London is a place of unimaginable wealth, a place that fuels an empire that drives the wheels of industry and commerce across the world. But it is also a place where its workers, the very backbone of its economy, are dying from the air they breathe, from the conditions they live in. It is a city that has built its fortune on the sweat and lungs of its people, but at what cost? The addiction to coal, the very thing that fuels its rise, also sows the seeds of its downfall. And this is the bitter truth that hangs in the air with every breath. Progress, no matter how grand, comes with a price. As we move through this journey, keep this in mind, dear listener. London, in all its glory, is not without its flaws. It is a city that gave birth to progress, to industry, to modernity. But it is also a city that in its pursuit of greatness forgot to care for the very people who made it great. And as you breathe in the thick air of this industrial world, remember that every breath is a reminder of that great cost, a reminder of the price of progress. Now that we've caught a breath or two and we've moved past the smog and soot that hangs over London like a heavy curtain, let us take a step deeper into the very heart of this bustling, ever-thriving city, its factories. These iron temples of industry are the true pulse of London, where the city's energy is harvested, shaped, and sent out into the world. But like so much in industrial London, there's a dark side to this progress. A side that hums not with the sound of success, but with the constant clatter of machinery, the grind of gears, and the heavy toll it takes on those who toil away inside. Imagine now the factory floor. It's not a place of pristine order or efficient operation, as we might expect today. No, dear listener, the factory in early industrial London is a chaotic, terrifying, and almost surreal place, a world of noise and danger, where the machines dominate and the workers are little more than cogs in the great wheel of progress. The air inside the factory is thick with dust. The heat from the machines makes it unbearable to breathe, and the noise, oh, the noise, the clanking of gears, the thumping of pistons, the constant whirring of machinery. It fills your ears and seems to settle deep in your bones, vibrating through every inch of your body. Step onto the factory floor and you'll immediately feel the weight of it all. The constant noise assaults you from every direction. It's impossible to hear yourself think over the cacophony of machines. The walls themselves seem to vibrate with the rhythm of industry shaking, with the force of the engines that drive the city's progress. Workers move among these machines like ghosts, their faces dusted with soot, their bodies bent and battered from the unrelenting physical toll of the work. They are part of a system that never stops, a system that cares little for the wear and tear it places on the people who fuel it. And yet, despite the noise, the heat, and the danger, the factory is where the work is. It's where the money is made, where goods are produced on an unimaginable scale. You might find yourself amidst rows of spinning looms in a textile mill, the sound of the spinning wheels filling the air, the clatter and whirring creating a dizzying rhythm that's impossible to escape. The work is unrelenting. 12, 14, sometimes even 16 hours of standing at these machines, operating them with the speed and precision that the factory owners demand. But the machines, these monstrous, hungry contraptions, don't care about your exhaustion. They don't care if you've been standing for hours on end with your legs aching and your back screaming for relief. The machines will keep running, and so will you whether you're ready or not. Now let's talk about the workers, the men, the women, and especially the children, whose small bodies were so valuable in this world of clanging machines. Children with their tiny hands, quick movements, and nimble bodies were perfect for working the factory floors. They could slip between machines, cleaning up the messes that the larger workers couldn't reach. And they did it for a fraction of the wages an adult would earn, making them a cheap, expendable labor force. Imagine, just for a moment, a child of 8 or 9 years old, crawling beneath a spinning loom, his heart pounding as the machine's teeth clatter above him. The air is thick with cotton dust, the noise is deafening, and the risk of injury is always just a breath away. If you're lucky, you escape with nothing more than a few bruises, but for many, the machines are unforgiving. A single slip, a moment's distraction, and a worker might lose a hand, an arm, or worse. These were the risks that defined the factory life. But it wasn't just the children who were vulnerable. Women, too, made up a large portion of the workforce, working the same grueling hours, performing the same dangerous tasks, often for even less pay. Women were prized for their delicate hands and nimble touch, which in the eyes of factory owners made them perfect for the delicate work of spinning and weaving. But of course, that delicate touch came at a cost. Women were subjected to the same harsh conditions, the same long hours, and the same unsafe machines as their male counterparts. The work was punishing, and the pay was insulting. Imagine standing all day in a factory, the noise deafening, the heat unbearable, and the air thick with the stench of sweat and coal. And when the workday finally ends, there's no relief. The women return home to small, cramped tenements, where the work continues in a different form, cooking, cleaning, and caring for children without rest, without reprieve. As you can imagine, the toll on the body is not just physical, it's emotional too. Workers develop a kind of fatalism about their situation. The machines keep running, and so do they. There's no question of stopping, no time to rest. The overseers move through the factory, shouting orders, cracking whips, making sure the work is done no matter the cost. The workers have little choice but to comply. After all, what else is there? They are just bodies moving from one machine to the next, their lives defined by the rhythm of the factory floor. If you slow down, you risk being punished. If you don't work fast enough, you risk being replaced. If you miss a shift, your wages are docked, or worse, your job is gone, and there are always hundreds of others waiting to take your place. But the machines, as much as they demand the workers' energy, also reflect the very heart of industrial London. These machines are the future. They are progress. The factories are the backbone of the city's growth, the very thing that fuels the empire. They are the symbols of modernization, of innovation, and of power. And yet beneath the shining steel and polished surfaces of these machines lies a hidden truth. These machines, with all their power and potential, are indifferent to human life. They grind on relentlessly, heedless of the toll they take on the people who feed them. They are the lifeblood of the city, but they are also its greatest destroyers. Let's imagine the factory workers now standing at their stations, their faces tired, their bodies worn down, but still pushing forward. The overseers yell, the machines churn, and the rhythm of the factory never stops. It's a relentless cycle of noise, sweat, and toil. And as they work, the workers know that the machines will never rest, not for them. The factory, this mechanical beast, does not care for them. It only cares for production, for output, for profit. The workers are nothing more than a means to an end, their worth, measured in the hours they spend at the machines and the output they produce. There is no time for rest, no time for reflection, no time to question the system that has enslaved them to the machinery of progress. And so as the factory floors hum with life, as the gears grind and the machines roar, the workers carry on. They are the heart and soul of this city, the ones who keep the wheels turning, the ones who power the machines. They are the ones who bear the weight of progress, and yet they are also the ones who suffer the most under its crushing force. And yet even in the face of this adversity, there is a strange resilience in these workers. They do not stop. They do not give in. They endure. The factory, despite all its dangers, despite the toll it takes on the body and the soul, becomes a second home to these workers. It is where they spend their days, where they sweat, where they bleed. It is where they earn their living, such as it is. And though the work is brutal, though the hours are long and the conditions are unforgiving, they continue to show up day after day because for many there is simply no other choice. The factory is the lifeblood of London, and the workers, though they may not see it, are its heartbeat. Now that we've taken a look at the heart of London's industrial pulse, the factories, the machines, and the relentless grind of progress, let's take a step back and observe the rhythm of the workers' lives. It's a rhythm that is anything but gentle, a rhythm that reverberates through the very bones of the city. The workday in industrial London is not just a long stretch of hours. It is a drawn-out battle for survival, a battle fought not just with machines, but with time itself. As the city begins to wake, so do its workers, though their waking moments are less about enjoying the sunrise and more about preparing for the exhausting day ahead. The streets are still dark with the early morning fog, the first light of dawn, barely enough to cut through the gloom. But there is no time to linger, no time to wait for the sun to rise fully. The factory bells ring loud, sharp, and insistent, and that bell is the call to arms for the workers. The factory floor waits for no one. The rhythm of industrial London is unforgiving. Imagine yourself in this world, waking before the sun has even risen. the sound of the factory bells echoing through the narrow, soot-covered streets. Your body aches from the long hours of yesterday, and yet there's no time for rest. The factory beckons, and with it comes the promise of work, of survival, of a paycheck that may or may not be enough to keep hunger at bay. But still you rise. The workers, no matter how weary, must keep moving. The city cannot afford for them to rest. The journey to work is no easy task. The streets are already filled with other workers, trudging toward the factories with the same weary determination, their faces pale, their bodies hunched from exhaustion. The morning air is cold, but it offers no relief. The fog, thick and choking, wraps itself around you like an unwelcome companion. The noise of the city grows louder as you approach the factories. The clatter of carts, the shouting of hawkers, the shuffling of hundreds of tired feet, all leading to the great iron gates of the factory. And once you pass through those gates, the day truly begins. Inside the factory, the air is thick with heat, with dust, with the constant hum of machinery. The noise is deafening, the clanging of metal, the whirring of wheels, the rhythmic pounding of pistons. It is a sound that never stops, a sound that fills your ears and seems to echo in your bones. The factory floor is chaotic, a dizzying array of machines, workers, and equipment, all moving at breakneck speed. The overseers patrol the floor, their eyes sharp, their voices loud, urging the workers to keep up, to keep moving. There is no time to slow down, no time to rest. The machines won't stop, and neither can the workers. The workday stretches out ahead, a marathon of exhaustion, of noise, of sweat. 12, 14, sometimes even 16 hours of constant labor with only brief moments of respite. There are no breaks, no time to sit down and rest. The workers are expected to keep moving, to keep feeding the machines with their energy, with their bodies. The hours blur together, one indistinguishable from the other. The factory floor becomes a kind of time warp, where the very concept of time is warped by the constant hum of industry. The minutes stretch slow down, then rush by again, each second feeling both infinite and fleeting. As the day wears on, the workers become nothing more than extensions of the machines. Their bodies are molded by the rhythm of the factory floor. Their movements are mechanical, repetitive. The machines run on coal, on steam, on the sweat of the workers, and the workers run on the same fuel. Their bodies are tired, their minds dulled by the constant noise, the constant motion. The work is exhausting, but there is no choice. The city depends on them. The machines depend on them. Survival depends on them. And yet the work is not just physically taxing, it is dangerous. Every movement is a calculated risk. A moment of distraction, a slip, a stumble. These are all it takes for an injury to occur. The machines are unforgiving, their sharp gears and spinning wheels, indifferent to human life. There are no safety measures, no guards, no warnings. A single misstep could mean the loss of a hand, a leg, or worse. The machines, these iron beasts, are hungry. They devour anything in their path, including the workers who feed them. And when a worker is injured, they are not given a moment to rest. They are pushed back to their stations, their injuries ignored, their pain dismissed. But even as the workers endure these dangers, they know that the factory will not stop. The machines will keep running, the gears will keep turning, and the overseers will keep shouting. The rhythm of the factory cannot be broken. The workers are simply there to keep it going, to ensure that the wheels of industry keep turning, that the goods keep being produced, that the factory continues to function. There is no time for rest. There is no time for injury. There is only time to work. And as the hours pass, as the fatigue sets in, there is no escape. The factory is not just a place of work, it is a prison. The workers are trapped, bound by the rhythm of the machines, by the demands of the overseers, by the need for a paycheck. They are locked into this system, a system that values production over human life, over human dignity. The factory is their world, and in this world there is no room for weakness. There is no room for anything but the constant grind of labor. But even in the midst of this grinding monotony, there is a strange, almost surreal sense of camaraderie among the workers. They are all in this together, trapped in the same cycle of exhaustion and danger. They share a bond, a shared experience of survival. They work side by side, moving in sync with the machines. Their movements synchronize, their lives intertwined. There is little time for conversation, but there is a kind of unspoken understanding between them. They know what it's like to endure the unending grind of the factory floor. They know what it's like to sacrifice their bodies, their time, their energy for the machines. And in this shared struggle, they find solace. They are not alone, even if they are surrounded by the deafening noise of industry. As the day finally draws to a close, the factory bell rings once more, signaling the end of another grueling shift. The workers, their bodies aching, their eyes bloodshot, begin to shuffle out of the factory, heading back to their cramped homes. The factory floor has taken its toll on them, but they are still standing. They are still moving. They have survived another day, and that is enough. But as they leave, they know that tomorrow will be the same. The factory will be waiting, the machines will be hungry, and they will return to feed them once again. The work is never truly over. The factory, this great machine of industry, is always there, always grinding, always consuming. And the workers, though weary, will keep coming back day after day, because there is no other choice. The factory needs them. London needs them. And so they endure. Now let's take a moment to reflect on what we've seen. The factory floor is not just a place of work. It is a world in itself, a world of noise, danger, and relentless labor. The workers are its lifeblood, feeding the machine with their energy, their bodies, their sweat. They are trapped in a system that values productivity over human life, over human dignity. And yet, despite the danger, the exhaustion, and the relentless rhythm of the factory, they endure. They endure because they must. They endure because the factory, this great engine of industry, cannot function without them. So, as we move forward, let's remember these workers, these silent heroes of industrial London. They are the ones who power the city, who feed the machine that drives the empire. Their labor, though it may seem invisible, is the very foundation of London's success. And though their lives are defined by the relentless grind of industry, they continue to push forward day after day because survival depends on it. The factory is their world, and they in turn are the heart of the factory. Now that we've witnessed the exhausting and often perilous reality of the factory floor, the noise, the heat, and the ceaseless grind of machines, it's time to take a step back and focus on one of the most heartbreaking and tragic realities of industrial London: the exploitation of children. Imagine for a moment the scene in a factory where the noise of machinery drowns out all else. The air is thick with dust and soot, the workers barely able to see through the haze of smoke and grime. Now imagine that among the workers you see children, small, fragile bodies moving between the machines, their tiny hands darting in and out of dangerous gears, their faces drawn with exhaustion, their eyes wide with fear. In the early days of industrial London, child labor was not just common, it was a necessity. The factories, ever hungry for cheap labor, turned to the youngest members of society, children, as a way to increase profits while keeping costs low. The factory owners prized children for their size, their agility, and their ability to fit into the smallest spaces, places where adult workers couldn't reach. And so they were put to work in these unforgiving environments, often from the tender age of 5 or 6. Imagine that a child not yet old enough to walk properly, crawling beneath the spinning wheels of a loom, ducking under the threat of injury, with every movement knowing that the slightest mistake could cost them a finger, a limb, or worse. These children, for whom childhood should have been a time of play, laughter, and learning, found themselves trapped in a world of gears, steam, and danger. They were given little more than the barest of training, if any at all. They didn't learn a trade. They didn't grow up in a world where they could dream of becoming something more. No, their fate was sealed from the moment they entered the factory floor. Their days were consumed by the same repetitive motions that marked the lives of the adults around them, and their nights were filled with exhaustion and the ever-present fear of injury or illness. Let's pause for a moment and think about what life must have been like for these children. Imagine yourself as a young child, perhaps just 7 or 8 years old, waking up before dawn, the factory bell already ringing in the distance, calling you to another day of work. You slip out of your makeshift bed, perhaps a ragged blanket on the floor of a cramped room, and prepare for the long, exhausting day ahead. Your stomach is empty, but there is no time to eat. The factory waits for no one. You head out into the streets of London, joining the throngs of other workers, adults, children, men and women, all heading in the same direction, toward the machines that will consume their day. As you walk through the dark streets, the fog heavy in the air, you can feel the weight of the day ahead pressing down on your small shoulders. You know what's waiting for you in the factory, the machines, the noise, the smoke. But you also know that if you don't show up, if you don't work, you won't get paid. And without that pay, your family won't survive. So you go. You trudge to the factory, your small legs carrying you through the gloom, the weight of the world on your back. When you arrive, you join the others, men, women, and children alike, crowding into the factory, where the heat and the noise immediately hit you like a wave. The machines are already running their gears, spinning their pistons, pumping each one, working in perfect synchronization to create the goods that will fuel London's progress. But to you, the machines are not symbols of progress. They are symbols of survival. If you don't keep up, if you don't work fast enough, you won't eat. If you don't work, your family won't survive. And so you do your best to fit in, to move between the machines, your tiny hands darting in and out of the gears, making sure that nothing jams, that nothing breaks. Every second you spend working is a second you're closer to the end of your day. But every second is also a second that brings you closer to the danger, to the ever-present threat of injury. Now let's imagine what happens when that danger becomes real. The machines, as we've seen, are unforgiving. They don't care if you're a child or an adult. They don't care if you're tired or hungry. They don't stop for anything. And in this world, a moment's distraction is all it takes for disaster to strike. A child's sleeve gets caught in a spinning wheel. A foot slips on the factory floor, And in an instant, what should have been a normal day of work turns into a tragedy. Fingers, arms, even entire limbs are lost in these machines, and the children who are caught in their teeth are left to face the consequences, injuries that will follow them for the rest of their lives. But it's not just the immediate dangers of the machines that these children face. There is also the toll that working in the factories takes on their bodies. Long hours spent in a hot, dusty, and overcrowded factory led to exhaustion, dehydration, and a variety of illnesses. The air thick with cotton dust, with coal smoke, with the remnants of the machines, is impossible to breathe without causing harm. The body, especially the tiny, fragile bodies of children, begins to break down under the strain. Lungs become coated with dust. The eyes begin to sting from the fumes, and the bones. Those little growing bones begin to suffer from the weight of standing for hours on end, from bending to fit into spaces too small for an adult, from moving in repetitive motions that eventually wear the body down. These children, so young, so small, are not just working to survive, they are being worked into the ground. Their bodies, their minds, their spirits are all being slowly worn down by the machines, the overseers, and the unrelenting rhythm of the factory floor. And yet they continue. There is no choice but to continue. The factory needs them, the city needs them, and their families depend on them. Now imagine the parents of these children. Imagine the mothers and fathers who, though they may wish to protect their children, have no choice but to send them into the factories day after day. They too know the danger their children face, but they also know that without that small wage, without the contribution of every member of the family, they will not survive. The very survival of the family depends on the children's labor, and so they let go of their children, watch them walk into the factory, and hope that they will make it through another day, hope that the machines won't take them. It is a hope that grows more desperate with each passing day, and yet they have no other option. In this way, the cycle continues. Children are sent into the factories, their small hands becoming just as important as the hands of the adults who work alongside them. The factories, the machines, and the city all depend on their labor, and as long as the children continue to work, the city continues to grow, to thrive, to expand. But at what cost? What happens to a society that demands so much from its youngest members? What happens when childhood, that time of innocence, is replaced with labor, with exhaustion, and with danger? The answer, my friend, is clear. The toll is unimaginable. And yet, as bleak as it is, there is a strange resilience in these children and their families. They do not give up. They continue to work to survive, to adapt. They find joy in the smallest things, a moment of rest, a laugh shared with a friend, the rare pleasure of a small meal, or a few minutes of peace. These small moments of joy are the threads that keep them going, the things that remind them that even in the face of unthinkable hardship, there is still life, still hope. They may be small, they may be vulnerable, but they are not without strength, and in this strength, they find a way to endure. So, let us take a moment to remember these children, these silent workers of industrial London, who gave their bodies, their youth, and their health to the machines that powered the city. Their sacrifice, though often invisible, is woven into the very fabric of London's rise to greatness. And while we can never forget the cost of that sacrifice, we can honor their resilience, their determination, and their unwavering strength. They may have been children, but in the factory, they were workers, just like the rest. And they carried the weight of the world on their tiny shoulders. Now that we've ventured into the world of child labor, where small hands and tiny bodies were put to work in the relentless machines of industrial London, let us turn our focus to another group of workers who played an equally significant, if not more grueling role in keeping the city running: the women. These women, with their delicate hands and nimble fingers, became indispensable in the factories, working alongside men and children in a world that demanded not just their labor, but their endurance, their strength, and their ability to survive in conditions that seemed designed to break even the most robust of workers. Imagine, if you will, stepping into one of London's factories, your eyes adjusting to the dim light, your ears ringing from the deafening clatter of machines. Now look around you. Amidst the clattering of gears and the constant hum of industry, you see them women working just as hard as the men, their faces coated with soot, their bodies hunched from the unrelenting demands of the factory floor. These women are not just working to survive, they are working to keep their families alive, to put food on the table, and to make sure that their children, husbands, and relatives don't starve in the face of London's ever-growing industrial machine. The women of industrial London were often tasked with the most delicate, and yet, ironically, the most backbreaking work. Their nimble hands were prized for their ability to perform intricate tasks with precision. But don't be fooled by this description. The work they did was no less brutal than the tasks their male counterparts performed. Women worked in textile mills, match factories, and workshops, where the constant noise of machines filled the air, where the heat was suffocating, and where the very air they breathed was thick with the dust and fumes of industry. Imagine yourself as a woman on the factory floor. You're standing beside a spinning loom, the wheels turning, the machine humming, and your hands working swiftly to keep the fibers from getting tangled in the gears. The noise is deafening, the air is heavy with dust, and every few moments you have to duck and weave between the machines to avoid getting caught in their spinning parts. The work is delicate, requiring precision and speed, but it's also exhausting. Your back aches, your legs tremble from standing for hours on end, and your hands are raw from the constant movement, but you don't stop. You can't. There's no time for rest, no time for relief. And as if the work wasn't hard enough, there's the added complication of pay. Women, despite working just as hard as the men, were paid significantly less. Factory owners justified this pay gap by arguing that women were naturally suited to the delicate work of the factory. But in reality, it was nothing more than a cheap way to exploit their labor. Women were paid less because they were considered secondary earners, contributing to a household, but not expected to be the primary breadwinners. But for many women, this wage wasn't a supplement. It was the difference between survival and starvation. Without it, families would go hungry. The grim reality of factory life for women didn't end when the factory bell rang for the day. After a long, grueling shift, the women left the factory floor, their bodies exhausted, their minds weary from the endless repetition of the machines. But their work didn't stop there. No, the factory was only one part of the labor they had to endure. When they returned home, they were expected to continue their work, cooking, cleaning, caring for children, and attending to the never-ending chores that filled their small, cramped homes. There was no time for rest, no time for relaxation. The work, it seemed, was endless. The factory demanded their energy by day, and the home demanded it by night. Imagine for a moment the life of a woman living in one of the overcrowded tenements of industrial London. Her shift in the factory might last 12 hours or more, and when she returns home, her work is far from over. She enters her tiny, dimly lit room, perhaps to find children crying meals, to prepare laundry, to wash, and the constant noise of the street filtering in through the thin walls. The tenement is cramped, the air stale, and the sounds of the other tenants arguing, crying, fighting, living fill the space around her. She sets to work immediately, cooking what little food she can scrape together, caring for her children, and perhaps, if she's lucky, managing a few hours of sleep before the factory bell calls her back to work the next day. But it wasn't just the physical labor that wore these women down. There was also the emotional toll, the psychological weight of knowing that no matter how hard they worked, no matter how much they sacrificed, they were still not seen as equal to their male counterparts. The factory owners, the overseers, the men who worked alongside them, they all saw the women as expendable, as secondary. The women were treated with little regard, their efforts undervalued, and their contributions dismissed. Yet, despite this, they continued. They kept working day after day because they had no choice. Their families depended on them, and so they pushed through the exhaustion, the mistreatment, and the endless grind of labor. Now let's consider the toll this kind of labor took on their bodies. The work was hard, but it was also dangerous. In the textile mills, the constant exposure to dust and lint led to severe lung diseases, while the toxic fumes in match factories caused a condition known as phossy jaw, a horrible affliction where the jawbone rotted away due to exposure to white phosphorus. In the metal workshops, women's hands were often burnt by hot metal, and their clothes caught in the machines, leaving them with permanent scars. But none of this stopped them. There was no time to complain, no time to rest. Their bodies became battered and bruised, their hands scarred from the constant motion, their legs swollen from standing for hours. But they kept moving forward. The factory needed them. London needed them. And above all, their families needed them. What we must understand, dear listener, is that these women, though exploited, though broken by the factory system, were not powerless. They had an extraordinary strength, a resilience that kept them going, even in the face of the most grueling conditions. They carried the weight of their families, of society's expectations, of an entire city's economy on their shoulders. They may have been treated as disposable by the factory owners, but they were the backbone of industrial London. They were the ones who kept the wheels turning, who ensured that the machines hummed day after day. Without them, the city would have ground to a halt. But even in the face of all this adversity, these women found ways to endure, to fight back. They formed communities, built networks of support, and found solidarity with one another. They shared what little they had, food, coal, news, and sometimes just a few moments of respite from the endless work. They comforted one another in times of loss, and they fought for change, for a better life. The women of industrial London were not just passive victims of a broken system. They were active agents of resistance, finding ways to survive, to thrive, and to challenge the very system that sought to break them. Now let us pause for a moment to consider the legacy of these women. Their stories, though often overlooked, are crucial to understanding the rise of industrial London. They were the unsung heroes of the industrial age, working tirelessly to build the empire, to fuel the machines of progress, and to support their families. Their labor, though undervalued, was essential to the city's survival. And while their stories are often told in the shadows, their contributions remain at the heart of London's rise to greatness. So, as we move forward, let's take a moment to honor these women, these quiet powerhouses who labored in the factories, in the homes, and in the streets. Their work was not easy. Their lives were filled with hardship, but they endured. And in their endurance, they left a legacy that would inspire generations to come. The machines may have run on coal, but the factories ran on the strength, the resilience, and the unwavering spirit of the women who worked in them. Now that we've seen the hard lives of the workers, the men, women, and children who powered London's industrial machine, it's time to step deeper into the very heart of this throbbing metallic beast, the factory floor itself. The factories are not just places of work. They are the embodiment of London's industrial revolution. They are the beating heart of the city, pumping out goods, ideas, and yes, even lives in a continuous, ceaseless cycle. They are in many ways the foundation upon which London's progress was built, but they also serve as the very symbol of the exploitation that powered this grand empire. Step with me into one of these factories. Imagine the walls and ceilings caked with soot, the air thick and heavy with dust and fumes. The floor is a sea of motion workers, bent over machines, their faces shadowed by the steam that rises from the massive engines and boilers that fuel the operation. The clang of metal against metal, the screech of wheels spinning, the hiss of steam. All of it blends into an overwhelming cacophony of sound. It's a noise that seems to seep into your very bones, reverberating deep inside, pulsing through your body as the machines hum their eternal rhythm. These factories are not clean or neat. No, they are chaotic, full of moving parts that work together in perfect, though dangerous harmony. The machines, these colossal iron beasts, are fed by steam, by the very blood of the workers who toil at them. The air is thick with heat and dust, and each breath is an effort. The air you breathe a mixture of sweat oil, metal, and coal. The workers, their faces grim and coated in a layer of soot, move like parts of the machinery themselves. Part of the great grinding engine that drives London forward. The factory floor is a harsh, unforgiving place where every movement matters. It is a place where time seems to lose all meaning as the hours stretch endlessly into the day, and the workers must keep pace with the machines lest they fall behind. The factory floor is not just a space where products are made. It is a space where bodies are pushed to their limits, where the human spirit is tested in ways that seem almost unimaginable. The workers, however, are bound to the factory, tethered by the need for a paycheck, for survival, for the very basic necessities of life. In the factories, there is no luxury, no comfort, no relief. It is all about speed, efficiency, and output. Every worker has a job to do, and there is little room for error. A mistake, even a small one, could cost a worker their job, or worse, could result in injury. For the machines, unforgiving as they are, care little for the lives of the people who operate them. The gears churn, the wheels turn, and the steam hisses without stopping, without slowing. The workers must keep up day after day, hour after hour. As you walk through the factory floor, you see the faces of those who toil here. The men, their brows furrowed in concentration, their hands steady but worn, are bent over their workstations. They operate the machines with practiced ease, their movements fluid despite the exhaustion that must surely be weighing on them. But their bodies, oh, their bodies tell the story. You can see the strain in their shoulders, the weariness in their eyes, the slow, deliberate way they move, knowing that if they falter, the machines will not wait. The women too, though fewer in number on the factory floor, are just as immersed in the endless cycle of work. They operate. The smaller machines tend to the delicate tasks that require nimble fingers, yet their physical toll is no less than that of the men. Their backs ache, their hands blistered and raw from the constant motion. And all around them, the children move in and out of the machines, slipping between the gears with alarming agility, their faces set with the grim determination of those who know there is no other way. The factory floor is in many ways a machine itself, each worker a cog, each movement an integral part of the whole. It is a place where the human element is stripped away, where individual lives are swallowed up in the great unstoppable march of industry. The workers, though they are the lifeblood of the factory, are treated as little more than interchangeable parts. If one part breaks down, it is replaced with another. The machines do not care who is operating them, as long as the work gets done, as long as the products flow out at the required rate. The workers are a means to an end. They are there to keep the wheels turning, to keep the machines humming. And yet, despite the constant noise, the relentless pace, and the crushing weight of the factory floor, there is a strange kind of solidarity among the workers. They share a bond, a shared experience that transcends their individual hardships. They are all in this together, all part of the same grinding, whirring machine that makes the city tick. There is camaraderie here, though it is born not of luxury or leisure, but of survival. The workers know that their strength lies in unity, that only by working together can they hope to make it through another day, another week, another year. This camaraderie is forged in the fire of shared struggle. The workers find solace in one another in the simple act of working side by side. They share stories, pass around small morsels of food, and offer a kind word or a quick laugh to ease the strain of the work. They form friendships, alliances, even families within the factory walls, all bound together by the simple but unyielding need to survive. But even as they support one another, there is always the shadow of the overseer, the ever-present reminder that they are not in control of their fate. The overseer, ever vigilant, watches over them, cracking the whip of authority and ensuring that the work continues without interruption. The overseer is the embodiment of the factory itself, the unyielding force that demands productivity, that values output over well-being. They are the keepers of the factory's rhythm, the enforcers of its relentless pace. The workers know that they must meet the expectations set before them, that they must perform to the best of their ability or risk facing punishment. The overseer's job is to ensure that the factory runs smoothly, that the machines do not slow down, and that the workers keep up. But in this constant race against time, the workers are often left behind, their bodies aching, their spirits worn thin, all for the sake of keeping the factory running. And so the cycle continues. The factory floor, with its noise, its heat, its unrelenting rhythm, becomes both a prison and a lifeline. The workers are bound to it, trapped in its ceaseless demands, yet they are also sustained by it. It is here, in the heart of the factory, that they earn their living, that they survive. It is here that they find their place in the world, even as they give up their bodies, their time, and their energy to the machines that drive the city forward. But as the days pass, as the weeks turn into months, and the months stretch into years, the toll of the factory floor begins to show. The workers, though, they are the backbone of industrial London, are worn down by the constant grind. Their bodies grow tired, their minds grow numb, and the factory that once gave them purpose becomes the very thing that consumes them. The machines, the overseers, the relentless pace, all of it begins to take its toll, and the workers begin to wonder if they will ever escape the factory's grip. But even in the face of this exhaustion, this weariness, the workers press on. They know that they must. The factory is the lifeblood of the city, the very thing that keeps London moving, and they are its heart. They are the ones who make the machines run, who feed the city's insatiable hunger for progress. And though the factory floor may wear them down, they are not without strength. The strength to endure, to push through the pain, to continue on. Because in the end, the factory, for all its noise, its danger, and its unyielding demands, is where their lives are made. And in its rhythm, they find a kind of meaning, a kind of purpose that drives them forward day after day, year after year. And so, dear listener, let us pause for a moment and reflect on the workers who inhabit the factory floor. They are the ones who keep the machines running, who power the great engine of industrial London. They are the silent forces that drive the city forward, even as they are consumed by it. Their lives, their struggles, and their resilience are the very fabric of London's progress, and though their stories may often be forgotten, they are the true heart of the city. As we continue to walk through the grimy streets of industrial London, let's take a moment to turn our attention to something that, while often overlooked, is undeniably at the heart of it all: the wages. The amount of money earned by the workers in this industrial labyrinth, the payment that they scrape together for their long hours of exhausting labor. For those who are fortunate enough to have work, their wages are often little more than a pittance. Barely enough to cover the barest of necessities, and certainly not enough to afford any semblance of comfort. These wages are a reflection of the system that fuels the city, a system that values production above all else and regards human life as little more than another resource to be exploited. Imagine for a moment the worker at the end of a long day, your body aching, your spirit drained from hours spent with your hands toiling in the factory, your back bent under the weight of your labor. The factory bell rings, signaling the end of another grueling shift, and you shuffle out alongside hundreds of others, all of you weary and burdened by the same exhaustion. But as you step outside and feel the cold night air against your face, there's still the question of what comes next. The factory is done with you for the day, but your life doesn't stop. The wages, the ones you've worked so hard to earn, are still in your pocket, but they are not enough. Not enough to buy food for your family, not enough to pay for your rent, not enough to cover the endless bills that pile up each month. You see, the wages that these workers receive are not a fair reflection of the labor they provide. The amount they take home at the end of each week or month is pitifully small. And what's worse, it's often uncertain. For the factory owners, the workers are not people. They are simply cogs in a machine, to be used, replaced, and discarded as necessary. The hours are long, the work is hard, and yet the wages remain stagnant, barely enough to survive on. For many workers, there is no hope of ever breaking free from this cycle of poverty. The wage they receive is just enough to keep them alive for another day, but not enough to lift them out of the depths of poverty. Let's take a closer look at this bleak reality. The workers, exhausted from the factory floor, arrive home at the end of each day, knowing that the few shillings or pennies they've earned will need to stretch to cover rent, food, clothing, and all the other costs that come with living in this sprawling industrial city. A week's pay might not even cover a week's worth of food. You stretch your pennies, make do with scraps, and live in cramped, overcrowded tenements where the walls are thin and the air is thick with the same smoke that clogs your lungs. The hunger that gnaws at your stomach is something you have learned to live with, just as you've learned to live with the exhaustion that accompanies every day in the factory. The aches and pains of your body are the price of survival. But here's the catch. The factory owners know this. They know that they can pay their workers as little as possible because they have no other choice. There are always more workers waiting in the wings, always more bodies willing to take on the job, no matter the price. The demand for cheap labor is so great the competition for factory work so fierce that workers have no choice but to accept whatever wage is offered. If they refuse, there's always someone else who will take their place. And so the cycle continues. Workers are trapped, bound to their jobs, unable to escape because they need the money to survive, and the money they earn is barely enough to keep them from starvation. Even worse, these wages are often reduced further through various means. Docked wages for minor infractions, delays in pay, and the constant pressure to work faster, longer, and harder without receiving any increase in compensation. All of these contribute to the constant erosion of the workers' earnings. The factory owners are experts at squeezing every last drop of labor out of their workers while keeping the wages as low as possible. They'll pocket the profits, of course, while the workers, those who made the profits possible, are left to scrape by with what little they've been given. Now let's pause for a moment and reflect on how this situation affects the workers, not just physically, but emotionally. It's not just the physical exhaustion that takes its toll. No, it's the constant feeling of inadequacy, the crushing knowledge that no matter how hard you work, you will never earn enough to live a comfortable life. It's the nagging worry that you can never provide enough for your family, that your children will grow up in the same poverty-stricken conditions you did, and that your efforts will never be enough to break the cycle. You work hard, you give everything you have, and yet the money you earn seems to disappear the moment you get it. It's a constant battle, one that you're doomed to lose, because no matter how much you sacrifice, the wages will never reflect the value of your labor. But the workers, even in the face of this harsh reality, continue to push forward. They keep working because what else can they do? The factory needs them, the city needs them, and their families need them. So they endure. They find ways to make do with less, to stretch their pennies just a little further, to make their wages last for another day. And yet the question lingers: why must they endure this suffering? Why must they work so hard for so little? Why must their lives be defined by the very labor that fuels the city's progress? In the evenings after a long day of work, the workers return to their homes, exhausted, their bodies and minds worn thin by the constant grind of the factory. They might sit with their families, share a small meal, and try to relax for a moment before the cycle starts again. But there's always the nagging thought at the back of their minds, the worry that the next day will be just as exhausting, just as difficult, and that the wages they receive will continue to fall short of what they need. The work may end for the day, but the worry never does. It hangs in the air like the smog that blankets the city, a constant reminder of the harsh realities of factory life. And yet, despite this, the workers carry on. They find solace in small moments, moments of rest, moments of connection with their families, and moments of laughter amidst the hardship. They may not have much, but they have each other, and that in many ways is the greatest comfort they can find. In the face of the long hours, the meager wages, and the constant struggle, they continue to survive. They hold on to hope, however small, that one day things might improve. And so they keep working, keep enduring, because that is all they can do. The wages they receive may not be enough to lift them out of poverty, but they are enough to keep them alive, to keep them moving, to keep them going. The workers of industrial London may be trapped in a cycle of poverty, but they are not without strength. They have resilience, determination, and the unyielding will to survive. They endure not because they have no choice, but because they know that in the face of such hardship, the only thing left to do is to keep moving forward. And so, as we reflect on the wages of industrial London, let's remember that the price of progress, the cost of building an empire, is paid in many ways. It is paid in sweat, in blood, and in the lives of those who toil away day after day for wages that barely cover their most basic needs. But it is also paid in resilience, in the quiet strength of those who continue to push forward even when the odds are stacked against them. The workers may not have much, but they have each other, and in that shared struggle, they find a strength that no wage could ever quantify. They are the lifeblood of London, and their labor, though undervalued, is the very foundation upon which the city's greatness is built. Now that we've ventured into the factories, their machines, their relentless pace, the toll they take on the workers, and explored the wages that barely keep the workers afloat, let us turn our focus to the place where they return after the grueling hours spent in the factory. The tenements of industrial London, where the air is just as thick as the factory floor, the conditions equally harsh, and where survival is a constant challenge. These homes, if they can even be called homes, are where the workers spend the few hours of rest they can steal from the demands of the city, and where they face yet another form of hardship, overcrowding filth and the ever-present shadow of disease. Imagine if you were walking through the streets of a poor district in London. The air is thick with the same smog that blankets the factories, and the buildings, though once proud and sturdy, now sag with age and wear. The streets are narrow, the buildings crammed together in a seemingly haphazard fashion, each one leaning against the other, as if holding each other up in mutual support. The windows of the tenements are small and grimy, the shutters barely hanging on, and the smell that wafts out of them is a mix of stale air, unwashed bodies, and the constant dampness that seems to soak into every wall. There's a feeling of suffocation here, not just from the air, but from the sheer number of people crammed into every building, every room. The overcrowding is palpable, suffocating, and everywhere you turn, it's hard to escape the feeling that there is no space left, no privacy, no escape from the noise and the stench. These tenements, where the working class of London are forced to live, are far from what we might think of as homes. They are cramped, dark, and poorly ventilated, a far cry from the clean, airy spaces that the wealthier classes inhabit. For the workers, these buildings are not sanctuaries, not places of rest or comfort. They are places of survival. Each room is crowded with multiple families, each family squeezed into a tiny space, often no bigger than a small room in a modern house. These rooms are shared by mothers, fathers, children, and sometimes even extended family members, everyone living in close quarters with no privacy, no space to themselves. The walls are thin, the floors creak underfoot, and the sounds of neighbors' arguments, crying children. The constant shuffle of bodies are a constant presence. It's as though every person in the building is living on top of each other, their lives intertwined in ways that make personal space a luxury few can afford. The living conditions are, to say, the least appalling. The rooms are dark and damp, with little ventilation to let in the fresh air. The windows, if they're not boarded up or cracked, allow in only the faintest hint of light. The floors are uneven, the walls stained with years of neglect. And then there's the smell of unwashed bodies, of food that has gone bad, of human waste, and of the dampness that permeates everything. The water is scarce and often contaminated, the plumbing unreliable at best. You've probably seen the small buckets, the chamber pots sitting in the corners of these rooms. They're a necessity, for there's no other way to deal with the waste that piles up as the tenants try to live within these overcrowded, unsanitary spaces. The smell of human waste lingers in the air, and there is no escaping it. Now picture yourself in one of these rooms, the factory bell still ringing in your ears, the exhaustion of a long day's work weighing heavily on your body. The moment you step into the small, dark room that is your home, you are struck by the oppressive nature of it all. There is no space to breathe, no room to move without bumping into someone. The bed, if it can even be called a bed, is little more than a pile of straw covered by a thin, worn-out blanket. You lie down, but there is no relief from the hard surface beneath you. The air is stale, and every breath you take is thick with the smells of the room. The sound of your neighbors' muffled voices, the cries of children, the scrape of chairs on the floor fills the silence. And as you lie there, trying to rest, trying to find some semblance of comfort, you know that tomorrow will be the same as today. The factory will wait for you, and the cycle will continue. You can't escape it. This is your life now. But the harsh reality of tenement living isn't just about the lack of space or the uncomfortable conditions. It's about the constant threat of disease. These overcrowded, unsanitary conditions are a breeding ground for illnesses that spread quickly and easily. The dampness in the air, the filth that clings to every surface, the lack of clean water. All of these factors contribute to the rapid spread of diseases like cholera, typhus, and tuberculosis. In fact, it wasn't uncommon for entire families to fall ill in a matter of days as the disease spread from one person to another with terrifying speed. The medical care available to the working class was minimal at best, with many families having to rely on herbal remedies or the occasional visit from an overworked, underpaid doctor. But even in the face of such dire circumstances, the people of London's tenements manage to survive. They find small moments of joy, small sparks of light in the midst of their struggle. Neighbors share what little they have, whether it's food, coal, or just a kind word. Children play in the cramped hallways, their laughter a brief respite from the endless grind of life. And despite the filth, the sickness, and the constant overcrowding, there is a sense of community here. The workers may be oppressed, may be broken by the weight of their lives, but they are not without strength. They endure, they persist, and in that persistence, they find a way to survive, even in the harshest of conditions. Now let's step back for a moment and think about the contrast between the lives of the wealthy and the lives of the workers in these cramped tenements. The wealthy live in grand houses in neighborhoods with clean air, wide streets, and open spaces. They have access to fresh food, clean water, and the comforts of life that most of the working class can only dream of. Their homes are spacious, their lives full of leisure, their worries far removed from the harsh realities of the factory floor. But for the workers, the factory is their life. It is the engine that drives the city, and it is the engine that drives their existence. The wealthy may enjoy their comfort and luxury, but it is the workers, those living in the overcrowded tenements, who truly make the city run. Without them, London would not function. The workers are the foundation, the backbone of the city. And yet, despite their essential role, they are treated as expendable. They are seen as nothing more than tools useful, but easily replaced when worn out. The tenements they live in are a reflection of this treatment. They are seen as temporary, as disposable, just like the workers themselves. The building itself is a symbol of the disregard that society has for the people who work in the factories, who power the city. And yet, despite this, the workers persevere. They find a way to keep going day after day, hour after hour, because they have no choice. But let's pause for a moment and think about what this all means. The workers live in cramped, dirty, and overcrowded tenements, working long hours for wages that barely cover the cost of living. They endure harsh conditions, diseases, and exhaustion, all for the sake of survival. And yet, despite it all, they persist. They endure. They find ways to live, to love, to laugh, to make their lives meaningful in the face of such hardship. They are the unsung heroes of industrial London, the ones who make the city run, the ones who keep the wheels turning. Their strength, their resilience, their perseverance, these are the qualities that define them. And in their endurance, they create something that no factory, no machine, no building can replace: the human spirit. So, as we move forward, let's remember the workers who live in these tenements. Let's remember their struggle, their endurance, and their unwavering will to survive. Let's honor them for their contribution to the city, for their sacrifice, and for their strength. The factory floor may drive the city, but it is the people, the workers, the ones who live in these cramped, overcrowded homes who give the city its heart, and for that they deserve to be remembered. As we continue to move through the labyrinth of industrial London, having already witnessed the grueling labor, the meager wages, and the suffocating conditions of the tenements, it is impossible to ignore the ever-present specter that looms over this world disease. In a city so overcrowded, so poorly ventilated, and so dependent on industry, the toll of disease was inevitable. It spread with terrifying speed, taking lives and leaving families shattered in its wake. London, in its industrial glory, became a breeding ground for illnesses that thrived in the squalor and exhaustion of the working class. Imagine, if you will, a scene in the heart of a London slum, a cramped, dimly lit room where a family struggles to stay healthy. The father, worn down from long hours in the factory, returns home, his body aching from the unrelenting labor. The mother, exhausted from her own endless duties, tries to keep the household together, cooking what little food she can scrape together. But the children, oh, the children are not well. Their faces are pale, their eyes glassy with fever, their little bodies too weak to play. There is a cough, a rattling cough, that echoes through the room, and you know that it is more than just a cold. This is something deeper, something more insidious. It is the shadow of disease creeping silently through the home, spreading from one member of the family to another until it claims them all. This, dear listener, was the reality of life for so many in industrial London. Disease was not just a random occurrence. It was a constant, a lurking presence in the lives of the working poor. And it was made all the more insidious by the very conditions that define their lives: the overcrowded tenements, the unsanitary streets, the constant exposure to the pollution and toxins of the factories. These diseases, which spread so easily in these conditions, did not discriminate. They attacked young and old alike, leaving no one safe from their reach. The most notorious of these diseases was cholera. This deadly illness, caused by drinking water, contaminated with bacteria, wreaked havoc on London's population, especially in the slums where sanitation was almost non-existent. Imagine for a moment that you live in one of these overcrowded tenements. The air is thick with smoke and dust. The streets are filled with refuse, and the water you drink is often drawn from the same sources as the waste that is carelessly discarded on the streets. And then one day, cholera comes. It comes like a thief in the night, taking lives without warning, spreading from person to person, often killing in a matter of hours. People would fall ill, their stomachs cramping, their bodies racked with fever, and within a day or two, they would be gone. The disease spread so quickly that entire families could be wiped out in a matter of days, their homes left empty, their lives cut short. But cholera was not the only disease that plagued the workers of London. Typhus, a disease spread by lice and fleas, also took its toll on the working poor. The cramped, unsanitary conditions of the tenements were the perfect breeding ground for these pests. and the workers too exhausted to care for their bodies properly became easy victims. Typhus would slowly weaken its victims, causing high fever, severe headaches, and fatigue until the body could no longer fight the infection. As with cholera, the disease spread rapidly, infecting entire neighborhoods, decimating families, and leaving a trail of grief in its wake. And as the workers continued to live in these conditions, as they continued to breathe the polluted air and drink the contaminated water, they became increasingly vulnerable to these diseases, their bodies already weakened by the grueling work they did each day. The most heart-wrenching part of all of this was the sheer helplessness of it all. The workers had no power to protect themselves. There were no doctors to turn to, no hospitals to seek refuge in. In fact, many of the hospitals that existed at the time were little better than the tenements themselves, overcrowded, poorly maintained, and rife with disease. There was no public health system, no social safety net. The poor had to fend for themselves, relying on whatever scraps of knowledge they had, or perhaps on the kindness of their neighbors, to survive. In many cases, families had no choice but to care for their sick members in their own homes, often unable to afford the medical attention that could have saved them. This sense of helplessness, of being at the mercy of forces beyond their control, was a constant companion to the workers of London. They could not escape the pollution that filled the air. They could not escape the squalor in which they lived, and they could not escape the diseases that ravaged their bodies. The city, in its rush to industrialize, had created a world where life was fragile, where death could come quickly and without warning, and where the workers, those who powered the engines of progress, were often the first to be taken. But even in the face of such overwhelming odds, the workers of London did not give up. They endured. They found ways to survive, to protect themselves, and to care for their families. In the absence of government aid, they formed communities, looked after one another, and shared what little they had. The workers in the factories may have been treated as expendable, their lives reduced to little more than the value of their labor. But within their tenements, within their homes, they found strength in one another. They cared for the sick, they comforted the grieving, and they continued to push forward even as death knocked at their doors. But let's not forget the families who were left behind. Imagine once more the child who loses a parent to disease. The child who is left to fend for themselves, perhaps with no other family to turn to. The child who watches as their mother or father succumbs to cholera or typhus, their body wasting away until they are no more than a shadow of the person they once were. This was the reality for so many in industrial London, their lives marked by loss, by the constant threat of disease, and by the overwhelming grief of seeing loved ones taken away before their time. And so death became a constant companion, not just for the poor, but for all of London. It was a shadow that hung over the city, a reminder that no one was safe from the toll that industrialization had exacted on the human body. The factory owners, the wealthy, the elite, none of them were immune. While they may have lived in grand homes with clean air and fresh water, they were still subject to the diseases that ravaged the working class. Cholera and typhus did not distinguish between rich and poor. They took everyone regardless of their station in life. But even in the face of disease, in the face of death, the spirit of the working people of London did not break. They continued to live, to work, to struggle. They may have been battered by the hardships of life in industrial London, but they were not defeated. And in the midst of their suffering, they found something that no factory, no disease, and no overseer could take away: their humanity. Their strength, their ability to endure, to push through the darkest of days, was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. They survived, not because they had to, but because they refused to give up. Now, as we look at the impact of disease on these workers, let us not forget the legacy they left behind. The hardships they endured, the battles they fought against disease and death were not in vain. Their suffering helped spark change. It was the workers' fight for better conditions, for cleaner air, for better wages, and for the right to live without the constant threat of disease that eventually led to reforms. Reforms that would pave the way for better health care, better sanitation, and a safer, healthier future for those who came after. The workers of industrial London may have been forgotten by the history books, but their fight for survival and their perseverance in the face of overwhelming adversity laid the foundation for a better world. So, as we continue on this journey, let's take a moment to reflect on those who lived and died in the shadow of disease. Let's remember the children who lost their parents, the families who lost their loved ones, and the workers who endured the constant threat of illness as they toiled away in the factories. Their strength, their courage, and their resilience are a reminder of the price of progress and the human spirit's ability to survive, even in the face of the harshest conditions. They are the unsung heroes of industrial London, and we must honor them for their sacrifices. Their lives, though short and filled with suffering, were not without purpose. Through their struggles, they helped build the city that would go on to shape the modern world. Amidst the deafening clatter of the machines, the thick choking air of the tenements, and the ever-present threat of disease, there was one thing that the people of industrial London clung to with all their might: religion. In a world so harsh, so unrelenting, faith became not just a source of comfort, but a guiding force offering solace in the darkest of times. But religion in its many forms also served a darker role, one that was used to justify the oppressive systems that held the working class in its grasp. For the workers of London, faith was a double-edged sword. It was both a means of survival and a tool of control. Imagine, if you will, the scene inside one of London's many churches. The bells toll, calling the people to gather, and as the workers file in, dirt-streaked, tired, their eyes clouded with the weariness of the long workday, they find a moment of respite. The church, with its towering spires and solemn walls, offers a space that feels almost sacred, a contrast to the grimy, suffocating world outside. As they enter, the overwhelming noise of the streets fades into a hushed reverence. The stone floors are cool beneath their feet. The smell of incense lingers in the air, and the flickering of candlelight casts a warm glow over the congregation. Here, in this quiet, dimly lit space, they find peace. The service begins, the priest's voice rising above the stillness of the room, offering prayers and hymns that resonate with the struggles of the workers. The words echo through the high vaulted ceilings, filling the space with a sense of something greater, something eternal. For the workers, these moments in church are a chance to escape the grueling monotony of factory life, to lay down their burdens, and to be reminded of a higher power watching over them. The promises of salvation, of a better life beyond the hardships of this world, are spoken as truths, as assurances that there is meaning in their suffering. The workers, their hearts heavy with the weight of their labor, find comfort in the idea that their toil, their pain is not in vain. They are not forgotten. There is in this space a sense of hope that they carry with them, even as they return to their cramped homes and the factory floor. But as much as religion offered comfort to the workers, it also served as a tool of control. The church, with its powerful influence, often preached the virtues of patience, humility, and acceptance of one's place in life. The workers, already burdened by the oppressive conditions of their daily existence, were encouraged to accept their suffering as part of God's plan. The sermons often reminded them that the hardships they faced on earth would be rewarded in heaven. Suffering in this context was seen not as something to be fought against, but as something to be endured with the promise of divine reward waiting at the end of the struggle. The message was clear: if they worked hard, obeyed their superiors, and accepted their place in society, they would be rewarded in the afterlife. This ideology, preached from the pulpits, reinforced the status quo, ensuring that the workers remained subservient, docile, and compliant. In this way, the church served not only as a sanctuary, but also as a mechanism of control. The wealthy and the powerful, who benefited from the labor of the working class, knew that if they could keep the workers focused on their spiritual rewards, they would be less likely to demand change. The factory owners, the aristocracy, and the government all had a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. And so, religion became a means of pacifying the workers, of convincing them that their suffering was not just necessary, but divinely ordained. It was a way to keep them in line, to prevent them from rising up against the very system that oppressed them. Yet despite this, religion was not without its moments of rebellion. For some workers, the church offered more than just a means of solace. It became a place where they could challenge the injustices of their world. There were those who sought to use their faith to inspire change, to call for a better life, not just in the afterlife, but in the here and now. Some religious leaders took it upon themselves to speak out against the abuses of the factory system, to call for fair wages, better working conditions, and an end to the exploitation of the poor. These voices, though often drowned out by the dominant narrative of patience and suffering, did exist. They were the early stirrings of social reform, the whispers of a movement that would eventually grow into something larger. But for many, religion was still a tool of survival, a way to endure the suffering, to find meaning in a world that often seemed devoid of it. And so the workers, while they found solace in the church, also found themselves at the mercy of its teachings. They prayed for better lives, for their families to be fed, for their bodies to be healed from the ravages of factory life. They prayed for the strength to endure another day, and for the courage to keep going, even when the weight of the world seemed too much to bear. In the church, they found both a refuge and a cage. It was a place where they could seek solace from the harshness of their world, but it was also a place where they were told to accept their fate, to submit to the will of God and the social order. As we reflect on the role of religion in the lives of the workers, let us not forget the complex relationship they had with it. For many, religion was both a balm for the soul and a reminder of their place in the world, a place where their labor was valued less than the goods they produced, where their suffering was a path to salvation. Yet even in the face of this, religion provided the workers with something essential: hope. Hope that there was a purpose to their suffering, that their lives had meaning beyond the factory floor, that the struggles they faced would one day be rewarded. It was this hope that allowed them to endure, to keep going, even when the world around them seemed determined to break them. Now, as the workers leave the church, their spirits lifted, even if only briefly, they return to the world outside, the world of machines, of smoke, of poverty, and of disease. But the church, though it may not offer the tangible comforts of food, shelter, or health, offers something just as essential: the belief that there is something beyond this world, something that transcends the hardships of the factory and the tenement. It offers a promise that in the end, their suffering will not be in vain. It is this promise, this hope, that sustains them through the darkest of times, even as the factory bells call them back to work. In the end, religion in industrial London was both a refuge and a tool of control. It was a place where the working class could seek solace, a place where they could find strength in the face of adversity. But it was also a place where they were taught to accept their place in society, to endure the hardships of their lives with the promise of a better future in the afterlife. It was a complex, sometimes contradictory relationship, but it was one that provided the workers with the hope they needed to survive in a world that often seemed indifferent to their suffering. As we come to the end of this journey through industrial London, through the fog, the factories, and the lives of those who toiled endlessly in the name of progress, I invite you to take a moment to reflect. We've walked alongside the workers, the mothers, the fathers, the children, and the women who gave so much of themselves to fuel the great machine of industry. We've seen the toll it took, the long hours, the meager wages, the filthy tenements, the relentless disease, and yet despite all this, we've also witnessed something remarkable. Amidst the hardship, the pain, and the ever-present threat of death, there was something that carried them through the strength of the human spirit. You see, industrial London was a city built on the backs of its workers, a city of contrasts, magnificent in its rise, yet marred by the cost it exacted from those who powered it. The workers, though they were, often treated as little more than expendable parts in a vast, unfeeling machine, managed to carve out moments of humanity, moments of connection, and above all, moments of resilience. Even as they were ground down by the factory floors, by the diseases that ran rampant through the tenements, by the cruel systems that sought to keep them in place, they found ways to endure. They found ways to survive. The tenements, cramped and dark, were where the workers returned at the end of their long, exhausting days. There, amid the noise and the stink of the city, they found the comfort of family, the solace of shared struggle, and sometimes even the smallest flickers of hope. And within the churches, amidst the dusty pews and the solemn prayers, they found peace not just for the soul, but for the weary body. The church, though often used to reinforce the status quo, also provided a refuge, a place where the workers could escape the constant demands of their lives and seek solace in the arms of their faith. In the face of such relentless suffering, it was this belief, this hope for something greater, that kept them going. But let's not forget the true cost of this progress. The air they breathed, thick with coal and soot, was slowly poisoning them. The factories with their steam engines and clanging gears were places of danger, places where lives were lost, hands were maimed, and spirits were broken. The wages, though earned through sweat and sacrifice, were never enough to provide the comfort or dignity that the workers deserved. They worked tirelessly, but their labor was undervalued. Their health deteriorated, and their families suffered, but still they endured. And yet amid all of this, there was something unbreakable about the spirit of the workers. The stories we've heard, the story of the child laborers, the women who worked side by side with men for a fraction of the pay, the men who labored in the factories day after day, are stories of perseverance, of resilience, of a refusal to be crushed by the weight of the system that sought to keep them down. They were not passive victims of their circumstances. They were active participants in their own survival. They fought for what little they had, and when they could, they fought for change. Though they did not always succeed, their struggle was not in vain. The very suffering they endured led to the reforms we take for granted today: the labor laws, the child labor protections, the public health measures. All of these grew out of the painful lessons learned in the heart of industrial London. So, as we end this tale, I want to leave you with a thought. The history of industrial London is not just a story of factories and machines, of smoke and disease. It's a story of the people who lived, worked, and fought for a better life in the face of unimaginable hardship. These workers, these unsung heroes, built the foundation for the world we live in today. Without their toil, their sacrifices, and their endurance, London, and by extension, the modern world, would not be what it is now. And so, dear friend, as you sit back and reflect on these stories, I hope you take a moment to appreciate the strength that runs through them, the strength that runs through all of us, the same resilience that carried these workers through their darkest days is still alive today in each of us as we face our own struggles and hardships. The story of industrial London is a reminder of the power of the human spirit, the power to endure, to fight, and to rise again, no matter how many times we are knocked down. Thank you for taking this journey with me. I hope it's been a chance for you to connect with the past, to understand the lives of those who came before us, and to find inspiration in their stories. If you enjoyed this story, leave a comment, share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe. I'd love to hear from you about which parts of this journey resonated with you the most. And remember, as we move forward in our own lives, let's never forget the lessons of those who endured so much to pave the way for us. Let their strength be a light that guides us through our own challenges. Good night, my friend. May the stories we've shared tonight remind you of the strength within you, and may you rest well knowing that the spirit of those who came before us continues to live on in all of us.